Welcome to the sixth episode of the MD Leveroni Report. In the house, guys. I'm Kevin Leveroni, along with my co-host, Ron Harris. Ron, how are you? We have some special things coming up, as always. Guests coming up, brother. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Today we have Fouad Haas Abiad, one of the greatest bodybuilders to ever come out of Canada. And now, probably the greatest podcaster in this industry. I mean, let's be real. Let's be real. Who beats you? Who beats Fouad?
I don't think nobody's beating him right now. And that's actually why I wanted him to have on, because he certainly found his niche and everything. Fouad, welcome to the show.
How you doing, guys? Thank you very much for having me on. I was just telling Ron, I was like, I don't know if I fit in the right space. You guys had like a bunch of legends on and then me. So I'll take the compliment. I appreciate being on, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, man. It's good to have you with us. And I know you have an extreme busy schedule, and it's incredible what you've done. Ron, I'm gonna let you go ahead and start with a few questions for Fouad first, and
Sure. Yeah.
And then I'll come in.
Yeah, I want to get back to the beginning of how you got into bodybuilding and all that, because people look at, the way you look now and the way you looked in your prime. You were competing around 260, 270. You were in a norm. You still carried pretty much all your size. When people see that, they assume that you were always big and muscular. You were always the alpha male. Other guys always looking up to you, women fawning over at your feet. But that's what people would think. But they see this stallion, this muscular stallion. But that wasn't always the case. Weren't you a smaller guy when you first started out?
I was. I mean, I think genetically my family's got wider shoulders and all that, but I didn't ever have the, that really thick, round muscle belly that you see with a lot of the most genetically elite bodybuilders. It took me a long time to get that. And even when I was a little bit thicker, I don't think I developed it the way like Kevin did, for example, but it took me a long time to develop the thickness it took to place well at shows, because they just wanted us to be bigger and bigger. I think my structure was okay. Like I said, I had wider shoulders, narrower hips, but the game was to be bigger. So it took me a good 10 years. I mean, I started bodybuilding at 19 or 20. So I kind of started late in comparison to some guys. And I don't think I started noticing the thickness in my physique until I was like 30, 31, 32. And I have friends that developed it like in years, but in like 2-3 years, they were already developing that thick round muscle. And I always had like a longer, like athletic type look, but I kind of forced the thickness onto my body and was able to compete. I don't think I was ever able to get it on the way I wanted to, though, because I think at my best, I was around 238, 240, and it was just too small. It looked too small on my body. Like Kevin's 240 was not equal to my 240.
Yeah.
So it just didn't look right. And by the time I got the thickness where I was 250, 255 on stage, it had changed my shape a little bit. So I think I did well, but I don't think I was, if I look back, I wouldn't say I was suited to be at the very top because of the way I was built.
Yeah. Because you won a few pro shows from what I remember.
I won a couple pro shows. Yeah.
You won a couple. Yeah. And weren't you third at the Arnold Classic one year too?
No, I think the best I did, the Arnold's and the Olympia is another story. I think the pressure of those shows always got to me. I don't think I ever landed at my best at either one of those shows. They were always the shows that I did worst at. And I think the pressure kind of took its toll on me more than anything in those shows. The best I did at the Arnold's was a 6th place.
Okay.
It was just too big for me for some reason. I never could overcome that, oh my God, it's the Arnold's feeling. And always some type of self-sabotage always took place leading up to those shows. And people hear that and they think, well, why did you do that? And it's like, those things don't happen on purpose. So, no, I'm happy with my career. I think I did well in my career. I think I could have done better with a better mindset. Let's just put it that way.
Fouad, it sounds like, there was some doubt along the way and not so sure, not so confident of yourself. But somehow you found your niche. But prior to coming up through growing up and everything, tell us a little bit about like why did you decide to get into bodybuilding? How was your childhood? And what made you transition into our sport? Was it something that clicked, or what happened?
Yeah, I actually had this conversation a little while ago with someone. I think there's a couple factors. I think my dad was very into wrestling, very into like action movies with Arnold and Rambo, and he would always like make the bicep at me and be like, "Look, my biceps are bigger than yours." He was a thicker guy, and that happened kind of growing up in my really early years. I remember those memories. So I think I gravitated towards being bigger, almost for him, but not on purpose. Like if I think of a subconscious reason that why that would have been there, that would have been a subconscious reason why I got into bodybuilding. I think on a more conscious level, I was playing football. I was kind of chubby in like grade 11, 12. And I started just doing cardio workouts and stuff like that to get lean. And then I started bouncing around 19. And I had a friend that was bouncing. He was like 260, like 5'9", just a really big guy, used to compete. And I was like kind of in awe of just that you could be that big and look that good and have that kind of muscle. So we went and actually watched one of his competitions, and it was just all in a bet. I didn't even think bodybuilding was cool. Like his physique was cool, but when I saw magazines and shit, I remember seeing Dory Nates on the cover of a magazine and thinking, I don't want that. Like I was buying the Men's Health magazines, and we went to a show, and I said, "Oh, I can do that." I was kind of joking around with my friends. I'm like, "I could do that." And they bet me. They're like, "Do it." So I took the bet. A year later, I got on stage. I won my first overall. I won then I entered a second show. Like a few months later, I won the second overall.
Wow.
And then I qualified at the provincials. I took third, but I qualified for nationals. So in 1 year, I went from like the first show I did to nationals. And then I took fifth at the nationals out of 20 guys.
Wow.
So I was like, I think I got something, right? So I loved working out. In my early 20s, I had like a social anxiety, which, I still deal with, but it was much worse. And the gym felt like home. Like the gym was a place I could go where my anxiety didn't bother me. It was like my own place. I put my headphones on, put my hoodie on, I would do my shit. And I didn't have to worry about any social anxiety or anything like that. So everything kind of just clicked. It was like, okay, I'm doing well in these shows. The gym feels like home. School doesn't really feel like it's me. Like I don't feel like the academic guy that wants to be. I did 2 years of university. I left university. I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. This is it. I want to make a living. And my goal was never to be like a great pro bodybuilder or anything like that. My goal was, how can I make money while being in the gym? I just want to be able to train and get paid for it. That was.
So you're like a loner. It sounds like you were like a loner. Were you a loner or?
It's weird. No, actually I got it. Like, in my 20s, like I ran with a group of guys, like there was 8-10 of us that used to train together and party together and all that. But I never liked anybody outside my circle.
Okay.
It was like I was cool with everybody in my circle, but outside my circle, I was very nervous around people I didn't know.
So where do you think the social anxiety came in? Like what age?
Well, I remember being, you don't really know what it is when you're younger, right? Like I remember I think it's from being different. Like, growing up I was born in Canada, but growing up here, it was like I felt different than everybody. Like every kid in my class was white. I think there was one black kid in my class, but I just felt different all the time. And I think when I got to high school, I started playing football and shit to kind of help me fit in a bit. And that did, like, I developed a lot of good friendships playing team sports. But I used to just think it was nervousness. I'd walk down the halls sometimes in high school, or maybe I remember some early memories in grade school. I was just getting nervous. And it really is. I mean, social anxiety is just nervousness if you think about it, right? It's not really anything more than that, but it's learning how to deal with it. That's kind of the thing. So I thought it was just nervousness. And then I started seeing patterns, like it would happen in certain places in certain instances. And so the way I dealt with it was like, I saw a couple doctors and they were like, look, you got to take these antidepressants, take these anti-anxiety pills and all this shit. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So I started reading about it and reading why it was happening and what the feelings were and how to adjust them. And through reading about it, it started to get better. I started to learn with it. Now,
So So why did it start happening? What were you learning from reading? What did the books tell you? And did you believe the book? Did you believe the research?
Well, I
Like
can't.
when did you finally say, okay, this is me and this is what I'm accepting to live with who I am, my personality, or did you, rebel against it or what?
My theory as to what it was just not feeling good enough, not feeling accepted, not feeling like I belonged, and always trying to fit in somehow. I think that's where it stems from. I think the solution to those things, and that's why I say it was stronger in my early 20s. In my opinion, the solution to those things is learning to love yourself, as cheesy as that sounds, or maybe a better way to put it is learning to be comfortable in your own skin.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I was like between 30 and 35 where I started to feel like this is who I am. I like who I am, good, bad, and ugly, whether I can be an asshole sometimes, whether I can be extremely loyal to my friends. I wear my heart on my sleeve. Like, that's just who I am. The good, the bad, the ugly, all that's who I am. And I like it. And I'll do what I can to change the bad things, but this is who I am. Mm-hmm. And I think it's learning to be comfortable in your own skin and learning to accept who you are starts to quell that anxiety in a way, right? It's never, I don't think I've completely conquered it. There's still times I get anxious and nervous, but who doesn't? Like, I mean, I think any normal person, and I think for somebody that if they said, I deal with anxiety, they just have more of those instances than the average person.
Yeah, I want to get into the bodybuilding career because you were doing pretty damn well for a while there. I want to know, at what point were you really happy with competing and planned to do it for many more years? And at what point did you start to think, I don't know how much longer I want to do this. I don't want to expand into, you started your supplement company. More recently, you started the podcast. When did you get that shift from I'm going to be a, bodybuilding to expanding to this whole other world, other side of the industry?
Well, we kind of talked about when, deciding to be a bodybuilder for good was around 23 or 4. I was working for my brother and I was in sales, and he said to me, look, you got to make a decision. You can't be going into meetings at 280 pounds, sweating with bags of food. Like, you can't be carrying around your lunchbox going to executive meetings. Like, this is not going to work. Mm-hmm. So my friends thought I was crazy because I had, like, at 23, I had a company car, company gas card, company phone, computer. And at 23, that seems like a big deal, but I was like, I don't want to do this shit. I don't want to sell gloves. We used to sell industrial gloves to like Ford, Chrysler, GM. I was like, I don't want to do this. So I told him, I'm like, I'm out. I'm going to bodybuild and put all my eggs in that basket. And that's what I did. And it panned out. And then around 27, I was like, okay, if I don't turn pro this year, I'm going to bail. And then I got my pro card and I got a contract with Muscle Tech and kind of rolled from there. And I was happy. Just like, I loved every bit of it. I have no regrets about bodybuilding. Like, everybody says this, I could have placed better. I could have this, I could have that. But as a whole, when I look back at my career, I'm extremely happy with what I've been able to accomplish, because my goal was to earn a living doing bodybuilding. And that's what I did. So it was good. And then as far as transitioning goes, that's kind of been forced upon me. A lot of people know I dealt with a lot of injuries. So it just gets really tough, man. You train a certain way, and then you tear a muscle, and you tear another muscle, and you tear another muscle, and you start to have to change your training. And when you've changed your training so much, it's hard to get back to that physique that you had when you were healthy. So for me, around like 36, 37, 38, I had a bunch of injuries in those 3 or 4 years there. And I was like, you know what? I'm having trouble coming back from this. And I still talk about it. But then on top of that, I have some, blood work issues that I don't want to make worse than they are now. So the retiring thing has kind of been forced upon me. Like, some guys would ignore their blood work and ignore the injuries and just keep going. And I'm like, if I can't do it at least at the level I used to, I don't want to just force it for no reason. So then I had a conversation with the family. I look up to my brother a lot, my sister, and we sat down, had a talk. And I said, I think I'm just going to get away from the whole thing. I'm just going to go into real estate. I had my fun in bodybuilding. I'm going to kind of walk away from it and do this other thing. And my brother said, it'd be a real shame to take 20 years of experience in something that you've mastered and just throw it all away. So he's like, what can you do? And I kind of had the supplement thing in mind. I saw people like, I actually worked for a company at the time that, the owner, I'm like, I know as much as this guy about supplements and bodybuilding. I'm like, there's no reason why he can do it and I can't. And then I looked around the industry and I'm like, Seth Feroce was doing his company. Kevin had his company. Jeff Long had a company. John Meadows, who's like a mentor of mine, had his company. And I'm like, I don't think there's any reason why I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
So with my wife having so much experience in the industry and my brother as an investor, it kind of clicked, and then the supplement company was born, and the podcast was just an accident.
Wow. Yeah, I got to hear about the accident because but you hear stories like that all the time, that something that ended up being big success started out as complete accident. So I have to hear this story.
Well, it's not
incredible how just all of a sudden it's an accident and boom. But you know what? As I'm listening to you, you sound like an individual that, of course, you've been through a lot. There's been doubts there, but somehow, you said you turned that corner and you came into owning who you are and you trusted, you know what? This is who I am. I don't give a shit about what anybody else thinks or anything. And I think at that point, everything, you just came into, what you were created to do, right? And, and like Ron said, you kind of stumbled over this whole thing. So going to that moment of, what Ron was talking about, like this, boom, flourishing, tell us about it's no accident. It's really, just meant to be, but you embraced and came to grips with, this is who I am. I'm not going to care about what anybody else thinks.
Yeah. Well, I think that part of it is just a self-confidence. Like, I think, look, I'm going to be completely honest, and those who follow me probably have heard the story before, but in my 20s, I wasn't the nicest guy, but it was an act. Like, it was, if a lot of people will say like insecurity is masked as arrogance, right? And I wasn't that bad, but I had my moments, right? But it was more of an insecurity than anything. And as I became more confident and got better in bodybuilding and learned more about myself, and actually I saw a sports coach for like 2 or 3 years, or life, I don't know, you call him a life coach, therapist, whatever you want to call him. But I learned more about myself, and I'm like, you don't have to be that way. And plus, working with John Meadows was a big deal too. Watching John talk to people and deal with people, whether they were one of the things I admired about him most was whether he was talking to Jay Cutler or some level 1 bodybuilder that had never had, nobody ever knew before, he was talking to him the same way. There was no like, oh, this guy's really important, I'm going to give him more time, and this guy's not, so I don't care. He's a very genuine person. I was like, that's a lot easier way to live. It's a lot more admirable way to live. So John had a big part in I think my growth, just from watching him be around people. But so I think I kind of grew up, and I think I matured, and I started kind of accepting who I was. And where the podcast comes in, my wife says to me, people are just seeing what I've seen all along. So like I think I had a persona that I had that was part of bodybuilding, but I had left my own self out. Like, Kevin, I don't know if you can identify with that. Like, you have a personality that you have at home, and you have your bodybuilding personality, and sometimes they're a little bit separate. Yeah. And she said, now you're just being yourself, and everybody's getting to see who you really are. And I always thought that was a good person, and you just never showed nobody. So she thinks that's the ticket behind the podcast. If I sat here and told you I knew why it was successful, I would be lying to you. I have no idea. But honestly, the way it came about was I just like watching Joe Rogan's podcast. I was like, Rogan's podcast is awesome. He gets to talk to new people every week. He gets to kind of expose the good parts of who those people are. And one of the main, one of the driving forces was, at the time, all I could kind of see was negative people in the industry with a huge microphone. Like, there wasn't any real bodybuilders telling our story. It was people that kind of knew bodybuilders that were talking about us, and most of the time in negative ways. And I'm not talking about magazines like MD or
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, you kind of know people know who I'm talking about. There's these loud voices that just really don't know shit. And I'm like, I think it's best for people to hear about bodybuilders first person from actual bodybuilders. Yeah. So I said, with those things combined, I met up with a friend. I told him my idea, and I said, I don't know how to do it. I'm scared to do it. And he said, look, turn the camera on and just start talking. Yeah. And what you see 2 years down the road will be very different from what you see on day one, but just start doing it. So I did like the first 3-4 episodes by myself. And then I started getting guests, and then I started doing the group thing, and all of them had good views from day one, and the responses were so good. I was like, okay. And I just kind of been rolling ever since. And I'm nervous as fuck when I do it. I don't know. That social anxiety is still there. Like Kevin, before our podcast, I was like thinking about it the night before. I'm like, I got Kevin Levrone on the podcast tomorrow. I don't know what I'm going to talk to him about. And, but I don't make notes, and I that's kind of the way I like to do it. I just get whoever on, and then we just start talking, and somehow I get through it, and people enjoy it. That's all. So that's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
I
think it's just all about, creating good content. I don't think there's a formula. There's so many videos how to get more views, do this, a thumbnail, and I don't think you can put it together like a formula like that, like you're assembling something from IKEA. It has to be from the heart. You have to be genuinely interested in what you're talking about and in the people you're talking to. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a huge reason why Fouad's, your podcasts have done so well is, not only are you you've lived this whole lifestyle with these people, but you can relate to them on that level. You can talk to them in a way that most people couldn't talk to them.
If I could say one thing about it, I think I'm a huge fan of the sport.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when someone's on, I don't feel like Fouad the bodybuilder. I almost feel like Fouad the fan. Mm. So like when I interview people, and I don't think some of these people that have shows know everything. They're like, they know all the science. They know all this. I don't know shit. I'm like, look, I'm a regular bodybuilder. I'm just, I made it because I work hard, whatever. And when I have people on, whether it be a coach or somebody, I'm actually on there learning.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why it works, is like, I'm just like everybody else who's watching. But I also have maybe a little bit of the backstory with my own bodybuilding career. So I honestly don't know. I just like doing it. I enjoy it. And people seem to like them too. So,
yeah. Now,
I think when you see yourself, you don't see what we see. Like your wife said, we see something that you don't see. Yeah. And sometimes I think when you have certain people that have these special gifts, they never see it, and they always kind of like doubt themselves. But one thing that you've done was you're not afraid to just share, your who you are, what you've been through, your weakest moments, where some people say, well, that's weak, but it brings so much strength to it, because it's like, hey, you know what? I did that. I'm not perfect, but what is really perfect? You've been able to tap into just keeping it real. And I think nothing's scripted, and don't need to be scripted, because your truthfulness speaks volumes. And I think that's why everything is opened up for you so much. And I always tell people, just stay true to who you are, forget about everybody else, what's going on. And you certainly come into that. And I think that's why I know exactly that's why things have blown up for you. And you've definitely found your who you are and how to touch people. And it's that realness.
Yeah. I think, you said some people will say it's weak. And the reason I know it's not is because part of the reason I do it is because when I talk about anxiety or talk about the any type of hardship that I've been through, inevitably I get a slew of DMs from people saying, I dealt with that exact same shit. I had no idea somebody like you dealt with that exact same shit. Yeah. And I really appreciate you talking about it, because it made me feel better. Mm-hmm. And so I'm coming at it from a position of, look, everybody feels this way, and I'm not scared to tell you that I feel this way. So like I said, if it helps, then that's cool. Then that's just kind of, I don't feel a need to hide it. Like there's no need to hide it. Right. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change what I've done. It just, some people deal with things differently than others.
Now, I have to bring this up, because if I don't, people are going to say, you jerk, why didn't you bring this up? So on Kevin's first show that we did, he had his training partner, Scott Rayner, on. And Scott,
come on.
I just want to.
No, go ahead.
I want to clear it up, because I don't want there to be any beef between anybody.
No, okay.
So, everybody's entitled to their opinion about physiques. It doesn't make you a jerk if you don't like someone's physique. we all like what we like. Some people think Dorian Yates was the greatest physique that ever walked the earth. Some people like, didn't have this, didn't have that. It's just physiques. We're not critiquing the human being. So sure. You had Ian Valliere on, and you were talking about Kevin Levrone. Kevin, were you even aware of this, Kevin? Because you heard Scott talking about it on the show, but I don't know if you were even aware.
I wasn't even aware.
He didn't even know. So Ian wasn't overly impressed with Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well, sorry. It's and I don't fault him for that. I'm not impressed with every great bodybuilder that everyone, we all have our own agendas and what we like. So anyway, Ian wasn't overly impressed. Scott took great offense to that,
mm-hmm.
and he spent a good few minutes expressing his displeasure at Ian, and people were jumping down Ian's throat in the comments, and that wasn't really fair. And I don't want there to be any bad vibes between anybody, because Ian said, even on your podcast, he's got nothing but respect for Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
It's just he didn't like certain poses or whatever, and that doesn't make him a jerk. And I think Scott's if Scott wanted to be upset about it, because Scott still is a very good friend of Kevin's, and was with him when he turned pro and did all the Olympia. So it's understandable that that Scott wasn't happy about those comments. But I think we all should be able to speak our minds, and we're not cheerleaders, because I've been in the position many times where I've critiqued a bodybuilder in an article or a video, whatever, and later they get very upset.
Mm-hmm.
Either in person or I get it from another person that they're pissed off at me, and Ron, that asshole said this and that about me. But it's I just want to talk about for a second, and you please comment on this for what. When mm-hmm. we comment on physiques, it's not a judgment on the person himself or his character. We're just picking apart things like structure, muscle bellies, body part balance, condition, things like that have nothing to do with the actual human being inside.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't feel as if we have to be cheerleaders and say everyone's the greatest, because everyone's not the greatest. Everyone's mm-hmm. not the greatest bodybuilder, because we have Mr. Olympia, then we have second place, third, and on down the line. So I just want to throw that out there, because we shouldn't have to worry about, and I hope Ian isn't upset at that backlash that he got, because I like Ian a lot and I don't hold it against him.
I think I'll clarify a couple things.
Sure.
First of all, Ian started out the conversation, I think, by saying Kevin was a better bodybuilder than he was.
Right.
So that automatically is coming from a place of respect, right?
Right.
I think when you give your opinion about a bodybuilder, there's a way to do it. I think when you're on a podcast and you're trying to make people laugh and it's this and that, maybe you might go overboard a bit.
Yeah.
I do think Ian clarified his statement afterwards. Like at the end of that conversation, he clarified and said, because when he said, in his exact words, where Kevin was overrated, and the way he meant it was because people were comparing Kevin to Phil Heath.
Okay.
And he meant in those terms, Kevin was overrated, that Kevin couldn't compete with Phil Heath because it's a different generation, different size, different body, whatever. Now, if somebody believes that or not, that's their opinion.
Yeah.
This is the problem I had with it. The reason I started the podcast was not to get views. People tell me all the time, like, you can create drama, man, get more views, and, more people will watch. I'm like, I don't give a shit. That's cheap views. Just like you can get cheap dollars, right? Like my supplement company, I can go hire a bunch of girls, put them in thongs and get more eyeballs and get cheap dollars, right? But I don't want cheap dollars and I don't want cheap views. So the problem I had with it, I had to talk with Ian afterwards, and I even messaged Kevin and I said, look, I'm sorry. If you want me to take it down, I will take it down, because I didn't feel like, I don't want my show to be about that.
Yeah.
Okay. If Ian wants to have his own channel, like on his YouTube channel, or go on some other talk show and, say his opinion about in that way, that's cool. I feel like there's a certain way to critique a physique and a certain way to talk about another bodybuilder if you don't like his physique and I think in that instance, it might've just been because we're all talking and laughing and it maybe got carried away. Yeah. But that isn't really what my show is about. It's happened a couple times on my show. And it probably won't happen again. It's not. Look, Ian's a very outspoken person.
Yeah.
And people love that about him. He says what's on his mind, and he says it how he likes it, and that's his prerogative to do that. But I think when it starts getting put on me, because I think people started saying stuff about my show and how that part kind of bothered me. I'm like, so it's been rectified. I apologize to Kevin. I talked to Ian about it, and that's not really what my show's about. So as far as your other question about should we be able to critique physiques, whether they're legends or not?
Yeah,
of course. I mean, this is what we're doing. Bodybuilding is people judge me all the time. People say, you know, your physique was crap. Your physique was great. You got to take it no matter who you are. But I think it's the way it's done is the most important part.
Yeah. And, you know, I just want to reiterate what you said. You don't go for clickbait. You don't ever go low like a lot of people do.
Well, wait a minute before you carry on. I do sometimes as a joke. when I had Chris Bumstead on, I said, Chris Bumstead's going to. I
saw like that. I'm going open. No, he's not.
I like to fool around with the clickbait shit, but not in a drama sense. Like I don't. Right. I don't want my channel to be the drama channel at all. That's not at all, because when we were talking about earlier about why we started the podcast, remember I said there was a lot of negative voices in bodybuilding that had a microphone.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And honest to God, one of my main objectives was to shine a light on the bodybuilders and who they actually are. So that's why when they come on, we don't just talk about carbs and protein and what their training's like. I try and get a sense of their history, who they are, what their family's life is like, blah, 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 because I want people to get to know the bodybuilders. And I want my channel to be a positive light in bodybuilding.
Yeah.
That wasn't an instance of being positive. So that's why I took offense to it I don't want that as part of my shows.
Yeah, I hope you didn't get mad that I brought that up, because I thought it needed. If we had you on with Kevin, I felt like if we didn't bring it up, people would say we were afraid to or whatever. I wanted to clear the air.
Yeah, well, Ron, I'm glad you did that, because I mean, for me, it doesn't matter. I mean, I've you know, when you compete in a Mr. Olympia, I mean, people compare me to Flex all the time and say, hey, you know, you're not as good as Flex, or you're not as good as this, or you didn't win this. Ha ha. That's why you didn't beat Ronnie. Ha ha. That's why you'll never win the Mr. Olympia. Ha ha. You know, your legs are going, oh, look at you. And you came back. Come on. This is part of the game. If you can't handle that, you know, get out the game. Criticism, whatever it is, take it. You know, this is a man's battle here, what we got going on. But Fouad, I definitely, I respect you stepping up to the plate and squashing that out, and you reaching out to me, because you're right. You know, we don't want that bashing thing. We do want a platform of building people up, and there is that fine line where you got to draw that line in the sand. Now, on to my training partner, Scott. We've been together for 32 years. So when he's hearing somebody say, oh, Kevin's overrated, and you got to think, the guy's looking at pictures. Scott saw me, you know, at shows backstage, and in that whole realm of the Mr. Olympia, when I'm up against Dorian and Ronnie, and in those heat of the moments and the transitioning, you know, me putting on 5 pounds of muscle, he's like, oh my God, how can somebody do this? So he's in that space, you know, and I got to say, you know what, he has every right to speak out about that, because he's been right there beside me, and he saw what I can do. And from everything, that whole perspective. So, you know, I embrace him going to battle for me as well. So, you
know, to be honest with you guys, the best course of action would be if you want to really squash this, is to get Ian on the podcast, because Ian is very well spoken, but Ian's also, like I said, we're having a laugh, and maybe he just got carried away. But I guarantee you, Ian has more respect for Kevin than anybody else, because if you're a bodybuilder and you've done it, and you're talking to somebody who's won 23 shows, I think, Kevin. Yeah. There's no lack of respect there.
Yeah.
It was just dissecting a physique, and, you know, we're in the show, and Ian is not a disrespectful person.
No.
It's just in the midst of a show. And I think if Ian was on here talking, which this question really should be asked to Ian, because I don't want to speak for him, but he's a good person. And I think it just, you know, that one show got carried away. That's all.
Yeah. What's the show where you have the groups of guys? Is it called Bro Chat?
Well, we do a bodybuilding and bollocks and a bro chat, which are really the same thing, but one's like 3 Italians and one's 3 guys from the UK. So I just separated the countries. But
bodybuilding and bollocks. Was that an outgrowth of the one they used to do before that?
Well, what happened was me and Luke, I had Luke on the podcast around episode, I don't know, 7 or 10 or something like that, way back. And we hit it off so well, we started doing that show together.
Okay.
So Bodybuilding Bullocks was an offshoot of the Real Bodybuilding Podcast. And it was just me and him, and we would do it every week.
Yeah.
And then when Luke passed, Ben came on because Ben was Luke's best friend.
Yeah.
And James came on because James is also one of Luke's very close friends, if not best friend. So the three of us kind of started doing together. And then from there we added Ian, and then I added a second show. So people seem to like the group thing because it makes them feel like they're hanging out with their buddies.
Yeah.
Because we all just talk shit to each other. And that's kind of like, that's kind of the dynamic, right? We're all talking shit to each other. It's kind of like a bunch of guys in a locker room. And then, you know, the conversations come up and sometimes they go, that one didn't go the way I wanted it to go, but you know.
Yeah, but you know what I do like a lot about those shows, I've seen a few of them, is it's some bodybuilding talk, but it's never all bodybuilding talk. Sometimes there's very little bodybuilding talk. You know, you talk about sports, sex, politics, whatever's going on in your heads, whatever's going on in your lives. And I think even people that are obsessed with bodybuilding and they breathe it 24/7 get sick of talking about it and hearing about it after a certain point. So it's cool the way you're able to have that group of guys and see that you all have lives outside. You don't just think about, you know, your next workout and your next meal and your next protein shake and all that stuff. That's what I like.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I'm actually proud of with the show, because I try and humanize the guys, right? Like when I'm coming up, I see pictures of Kevin or Ronnie or Jay, and it's just such a far out figure that you can't connect. Like it's just this person that you don't know anything about other than what they tell you in the magazines. So you have this idea of who they are, but you don't really know who they are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it really humanizes the guys to the point where it brings them down to everybody else's level.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I like about it. Cause like take Nick Walker, for example. Okay.
Yep.
So Nick Walker comes on like 4 episodes deep. He says to me, do people think I'm an asshole? And I'm like, I don't know, Nick. I'm like, you're a little bit like, you know, you're kind of like, you know, you look like a mutant and you're very quiet and you train real hard. I'm like, people probably think you're, you know, a little intense. Yeah. He's like, I keep getting DMs from people telling me how nice I am and how funny I am. And I'm like, yeah, because they heard you talk on a podcast for a couple hours and they realize you're just a normal human.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest bonuses that's come from the show, honest to God, my favorite part of all of it is when I have a guest on that people don't like, and I read in the comments how much they've changed their mind.
Wow.
And how much, yeah, that's actually, it's happened a few times. I don't want to name any bodybuilders, but it's happened quite a few times. And that's actually my absolute favorite part of what's happening. So.
I would have to ask you, because you're old enough to remember when we didn't have this access to the pros that we do now. So they would make training tapes and stuff, but you didn't really know. Like if you were a Kevin Leveroni fan in the 90s, you saw him in the magazines. Maybe you could buy his training tape or whatever. Maybe if you're lucky, you got to a seminar or something, but you never really got to know the man. And that went for all the pros. They were these larger than life figures that, you know, to us, they were like any other celebrity. They're not real people. They're just these images. And we can't imagine that they're just like us, that they wake up and go to sleep and piss and shit and, you know, get sad and get tired and get hungry. And, you know, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing that the bodybuilders, the pros now are so much more humanized that the fans feel like they're buddies with them?
I think it's a great thing. I think it's the best thing that could have happened to bodybuilding, because there's so many like Nick's a perfect example again. Like everybody thought he was an asshole. He's like the sweetest guy ever. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like how much better could it be? Like, do you really want people thinking the guy's an asshole? Like, okay, great. You're this far out figure that certain people love and you're put on a pedestal, but there's a whole swath of other people that think you're an asshole. That's not really that great, right? So I would rather have the person be humanized to still have a ton of fans, but also squash all those people that are like, oh, he's mean or he's an ass, or this is like, no, look, he's talking to you for 2 hours straight. You can get a sense of exactly who he is. Yeah. And it's like, you know, it's cool having that like example. Like I said, I was nervous before interviewing Kevin because I was that guy who was like, you know, Kevin Leveroni, you know, like Hall of Famer, like, oh my God. But then we talk and he's like, I like cars and I like playing the drums and it's kind of stuff that everybody knows, but it's different when you're having a conversation and it kind of brings that person down. I personally think it's good for especially bodybuilding, because it's not like other sports. Like people don't think of basketball players as as mean, insecure, intimidating figures. But bodybuilders, when people see them on the street, they're like, oh, that guy's conceited, or he's an asshole, or he's whatever, because he's all muscle bound, right?
Right.
So I think when we can all have a conversation, like, you know how many times I've read into comments, these bodybuilding guys have feelings, or these bodybuilding guys are smarter than I thought they were, or these bodybuilding guys actually think deeply about shit. Like, people think we're just morons that sit around, eat chicken and rice and fucking go work out. And I'm like, no, I think it's, I don't know, man. I personally think it's a good thing that people get to know who these guys are on a deeper level.
I think it's important, just because I'll be quick, Kevin, because we're different than all these other sports, because people watch football, basketball, baseball, and they're not players of that sport. Whereas the vast majority of bodybuilding fans are, at some level or another, bodybuilders, either recreational or they compete. And they do tend to, let's be real, they hate on the top pros. They might love them physique wise, but they're jealous of them. They hate them. And they might have a favorite that they'll like exempt from their hatred. But by and large, if you read, the comments are brutal on like Instagram and YouTube and stuff.
Yeah.
But these podcasts where they can see and connect with these people on another level, I think it goes a long way toward making the bodybuilding fans truer fans, like they should be, instead of saying, oh, that MFer, he's got 23-inch arms and mine are only 17. I hate him. Oh, he gets ripped and I can't get rid of my gut. I hate him. Yeah. But if you listen to someone like a Nick, it'd be very easy to hate on Nick Walker. He's a mutant. He's got all the muscle that all of us wish we had. And most of us are never going to look like that. But you get to know these people on a personal level, and all of a sudden you realize he's a good guy. Yeah, he's got this genetic gift that very few people have, but he's just like you and me. He's not a bad guy. He's a good kid. He's got a gift.
Yeah. That's
we're all human inside, and to be able to rip away the veils and realize, you know what, that guy has some stuff going on deep down inside of him. That's why you see the muscles first. They see the muscles and they judge us. But what did it take? What did that guy go through? What drove him to be that loner, to go to that space? Fool, I don't want to thank you coming on. Unfortunately, running out of time here.
It's okay.
And it's just incredible what you're doing. And it's no mistake. I know you said, oh, you just stumbled by, it's a mistake. It's no mistake that you have a gift and you have a talent. And as sitting here and listening to you, we talked before we started this and everything, and you're like, well, I'm good at interviewing people, but I'm not good at being interviewed. You're equal both ways.
Yeah, I totally disagree with that.
I love the voice that, you have that voice that just comes and it's piercing. And congratulations. And thank you for your time, for coming on the MD Leveroni Report, man. We love to have you back. I love to come on your show and also exercise, which you had mentioned. But keep broadening the horizon, man. Keep spreading the love. And we're incredibly honored and to have you on the show. And thank you so much, man. And keep fighting a good fight, brother. God bless you, man.
Before we go, I just want to say thank you very much for having me on the show. And Kevin, you have no idea what that means to me. Ron, of course, I appreciate it. But Kevin, you're, like I said, a Hall of Famer, and it means a lot coming from you to say that. And I appreciate you guys having me on the show together. MD's like a major part of bodybuilding. So thank you guys very much for allowing me to come on.
Yeah. Ron, we did it once again, brother.
Yeah.
Episode number 6. I think we're raising the bar higher and higher. And
I'll say.
Great, man. Well, guys, this is Kevin Leveroni wrapping it up with our guest Fuad, my co-host Ron Harris, here at episode number 6, finishing it up, baby. MD Leveroni Report in the house. Peace, love. Guys, stay blessed, and continue to follow your dreams. And I'll see you guys at the top. And we're out of here. Boom.
Thanks, everyone.